On the 22nd of October in 2014, Claire Throssell's life changed forever when her two sons, 12-year-old Jack and 9-year-old Paul, died as a result of a house fire that was caused by her ex-husband, which also killed him.
Sometimes the most devastating stories don't begin with a scream, they begin with silence. A silence that hides years of control, manipulation, and fear behind a mask of normality.
Claire has channeled her heartbreak into changing laws to prevent such tragic events from happening to another family.
And then she releases her new book, For My Boys.
This is the story of Claire Throssell, a mother who lived through unimaginable horror and turned that pain into purpose. It is a story that shook an entire nation, one that left television presenter Cat Deeley struggling to hold back tears live on air, as Claire recounted how the man she once loved took the lives of their two sons, Jack and Paul, in a fire he set himself.
Heartbreaking thing I've ever read. Can you take us back to the beginning?
A story that began like many others, with what seemed like love, and ended in a tragedy that would echo through British law and the hearts of every parent who heard it.
We should never have met. We were in different counties, but we were thrown together by a store opening at work. And he sent me a flower every day, a rose every day to my work.
Claire met Darren Sykes through work. At first, he was charming, romantic, persistent in the way that makes a person feel special. He sent her roses every day, small gestures that looked like affection, but in time would reveal themselves as the first signs of control disguised as devotion.
He was controlling, but it was couched in love. I'd say, oh, I'm going out with the girls tonight, and he'd say, that's a shame because I'd thought I'd do something special for you tonight, but that never happened, and I didn't go out with the girls.
What followed was a slow erosion of independence. What began as flattery turned into control, subtle at first, wrapped in kind words. He would say things like, "It's a shame you're going out tonight. I thought we could have a special evening together." And just like that, friends drifted away, invitations stopped coming, and the circle around her tightened until it was just him. The manipulation deepened over the years. He began to decide what she wore, returning clothes he didn't like, choosing the ones he approved of.
This control comes in. Oh, why are you wearing that dress? I bought you that dress the other day. Why wear that colour? Wear that colour. And it got to the point at the end, he would drive me back to a shop and take clothes back and then pick clothes that he wanted.
Step by step, she became trapped in a world where every move, every word, every thought was measured against his expectations. She had two beautiful boys, Jack, aged 12, and Paul, aged 9. They were her world, full of light, energy, and love. But even they were not shielded from the growing tension in the home. It wasn't until one violent confrontation, when Darren raised his hand toward Jack and Claire tried to intervene, that everything changed.
And then after that, there was violence. The boys were born, but there was violence towards you.
Yes.
And then what happened the day where you fell down the stairs?
That was the catalyst. I'd stayed because I knew he'd hurt the boys.
Yeah.
She fell down the stairs in the struggle, and that moment became the catalyst. It was the moment she knew she had to leave. She gathered her boys and moved into her mother's house, seeking safety, believing that the worst was over. But what followed was something experts now call separation abuse, the cruel and calculated continuation of control after a relationship ends.
The day when the fire happened, you had a feeling, didn't you? When you got back home and the two phones were on the table, because you'd always give them a phone and you had a text word. So if they needed to get in touch with you, you could go and get them.
Darren refused to let go. He used every legal right, every loophole, every visitation to remind her that she was never truly free. The court granted him 5 hours of contact a week with his sons. 5 hours that, to the outside world, looked like a father's right, but to Claire, felt like a ticking clock counting down to danger. She tried to tell the court she was afraid, that something didn't feel right, but her fears were dismissed. She was invisible, as she would later say, and so were her boys. On the morning of October 22, 2014, Claire woke up with a strange feeling in her chest. Her sons were with Darren for one of those court-ordered visits. They each had mobile phones, safety words they could text if they ever felt afraid, small measures of reassurance in an uncertain world. But that morning, both phones sat untouched on the kitchen table. Into the attic with a lie, telling them there were new trains for their train set. When they climbed the ladder, he trapped them inside. Then he joined them. The smoke, the flames, the heat, unimaginable. But in those final moments, courage appeared in the form of a 12-year-old boy named Jack. When Paul fell, overcome by the smoke, Jack turned back for his brother. He lifted him toward the hatch, fought against the flames, and tried to save him. It was Jack's hand that Paul felt last, because their mother only held him as he took his final breath. Firefighters later said that when they reached Jack, he was barely alive, burned, but conscious enough to speak. His last words were, "My dad did this, and he did it on purpose." Even as he was dying, he wanted to protect the truth, to make sure someone knew. He thought of his brother. He thought of his mother. He never thought of himself. In the end, both boys were gone. Their father died in the fire he started. The man who had once sent roses ended his life surrounded by the flames he created, leaving behind a mother to live with ashes and questions that would never find answers. In the years that followed, Claire's pain could have silenced her. But it didn't. Instead, she began to write. Through grief, through tears, through nights that felt endless, she wrote, not just for herself, but for Jack and Paul. Her book, For My Boys, became more than a memoir. It was a testament to their courage, a voice for every parent failed by a system that too often places parental rights above a child's safety. She spoke publicly about what happened, telling the world that no parent should have to fight this battle alone. Jack's voice was only heard on that landing when it was too late, she said, and those words would move governments to act. The Ministry of Justice responded, promising to review the presumption of parental involvement in custody cases, a small step, but one that began because one mother refused to be silent. Claire became an ambassador for Women's Aid and the Independent Domestic Abuse Service. She stood in Parliament, beside lawmakers and activists, pushing for a future where judges must fully assess the risk before allowing contact between children and abusive parents. Her campaign was rooted not in revenge, but in remembrance, a belief that her boys' courage, their love, their final acts of heroism could help save others. When she appeared on This Morning a decade after the fire, her calm strength filled the studio. Cat Deeley listened, visibly moved, struggling to contain her tears. "Claire," she said softly, "I don't think anybody is going to judge you for this book. It is truly the most heartbreaking thing I have ever read." In that moment, millions of viewers saw not just a story of loss, but of defiance, a mother who refused to let tragedy define her sons. She carried their memory in every word, every interview, every public speech. Because, as she said herself, when she's no longer here to speak, the truth must remain. And that truth is this: Jack and Paul were heroes. They were victims of a system that didn't listen. And they were the reason a nation began to question how many warning signs are ignored, how many mothers are dismissed when they say they are afraid. Claire's story is not just about grief. It's about survival, reform, and the quiet power of a mother's love that refused to die even when everything else did. Today, her voice stands for those who still live in fear, for those too afraid to speak, for every child whose voice was never heard. The fire took her sons, but it could not extinguish the light they left behind. And that light, their courage, their innocence, their final act of love, burns brighter than the flames that ended their lives. This is not just. A mother's intuition is rarely wrong. And when the doorbell rang, Claire knew. She saw the uniform through the frosted glass, the blue lights flashing outside her window, and her first words were not questions but instinct. What has he done? At the hospital in Sheffield, the truth unfolded. Darren had bought 5 canisters of petrol, set 14 separate fires throughout the house using Claire's belongings, and barricaded the exits. He lured the boys Claire's story. It's Jack's story. It's Paul's story. It's the story of every family failed by silence. And it's a reminder to us all that behind every tragedy reported on television, there's a mother still fighting to make sure her children are never forgotten.